Building an emergency fund isn't about living in a constant state of dread, bracing for disaster, or locking your money away in some untouchable vault. It's about something quieter and far more practical, recognizing that life is unpredictable by nature, that most financial stress isn't caused by the emergency itself, but by the absence of any cushion when one arrives, and that having even a modest buffer in place gives your everyday decisions a steadiness and clarity that simply isn't possible when you're one bad month away from crisis. Get specific about what this money is actually for. One of the biggest reasons people struggle to build an emergency fund is that the purpose behind it stays fuzzy. And when money doesn't have a clear job, it tends to get reassigned, quietly, gradually, toward convenience, comfort, or things that just feel urgent in the moment. An emergency fund isn't a flexible reserve. It exists for one reason: to absorb financial shocks that would otherwise derail you. Real emergencies look like job loss, unexpected medical bills, a vehicle breaking down when you need it to work, or a home repair that simply cannot wait. Knowing that in advance draws a firm line around the money before any crisis arrives. That line matters enormously because stress and emotion cloud judgment fast, and predefined boundaries replace the need to make hard calls in difficult moments. When the purpose is clear, building the fund feels intentional, and dipping into it for the wrong reasons becomes much harder to justify. Clarity is what transforms emergency saving from a vague good intention into an actual working system. Start smaller than you think you need to. A lot of people never begin saving for an emergency fund because the end goal looks enormous from where they're standing. Big targets have a way of triggering avoidance rather than action. The mind sees the gap between 0 and 3 months of expenses and quietly decides to wait for a better time. That better time rarely comes. Starting with a small, genuinely achievable amount sidesteps that resistance entirely. Early wins, even modest ones, build confidence, and confidence is what keeps the habit going when motivation fades. The habit itself matters more than the amount at first. Consistent small contributions lay the behavioral foundation long before the fund provides any real protection. And once saving starts to feel normal rather than heroic, momentum does the heavy lifting from there. Take the decision out of your own hands. Emergency funds collapse most often not because people don't care, but because saving gets left to whatever is left over at the end of the month. Real life doesn't reliably produce leftovers. Setting up an automatic transfer that moves money the moment income arrives removes saving from the daily decision pile entirely. There's no weighing it against other spending, no "I'll do it next week," no willpower required. These quiet background systems consistently outperform good intentions, especially during stressful stretches when everything feels like a competing priority. Automation converts a goal into a behavior. Repeated behavior is what eventually builds something worth having. Put the money somewhere deliberately inconvenient. An emergency fund is most at risk during the exact moments it exists to protect you from stressful, emotionally charged situations where the temptation to act impulsively is at its highest. When that money lives alongside everyday spending, it starts to feel flexible. Flexible starts to feel available. And available means it gets used for things that aren't real emergencies. A separate account, ideally one without a card attached, without notifications, without any features designed to make spending easier, creates the psychological distance needed to slow those impulses down. Out of sight genuinely does mean out of mind. Boring, low visibility accounts reduce the temptation that convenience creates. When the goal is protection, friction is a feature, not a flaw. Build first, optimize later. There's a common impulse to put emergency savings somewhere they can grow, to invest them, chase better returns, or turn idle money into productive money. The problem is that this impulse often stalls the process entirely, introducing complexity and hesitation before a single dollar is set aside. The core function of an emergency fund isn't growth, it's reliability. Money tied up in assets that fluctuate in value adds stress rather than removing it. When a genuine crisis hits, the last thing you need is uncertainty about whether your safety net has shrunk. A simple, stable, liquid account provides the certainty that allows clear thinking under pressure. It prevents panic borrowing, forced debt, and the cascade of financial damage that follows. Optimization is a later stage concern. Protection has to come first. Break the goal into stages that feel real. Most emergency fund advice leads with a final number: 3 months of expenses, 6 months, sometimes more. Those numbers aren't wrong, but presented as the only finish line, they can stop progress before it starts. The gap feels too wide, the goal too distant, and inaction becomes the default. Breaking the journey into smaller milestones changes that dynamic. Reaching the first $500 means something. So does the first month of expenses covered. Each stage offers genuine, if partial, protection, and partial protection still reduces the likelihood of reaching for a credit card when something unexpected happens. Visible progress reinforces the behavior that created it. Reinforced behavior builds consistency. Consistency, over time, is what builds lasting financial security. Reframe what doing nothing actually means. It's easy to look at an emergency fund sitting untouched for months or years and start to wonder whether it was worth building. That frustration is understandable, but it's based on a misreading of what the money is doing. An emergency fund that never gets used hasn't been wasted. It's been working the entire time. Its value isn't measured in interest earned, it's measured in debt avoided, panic prevented, and forced decisions never made. Every day that buffer exists, it's quietly improving the quality of choices across your entire financial life. Peace of mind is not a soft, vague benefit. It directly shapes how you spend, plan, and respond to setbacks. Nobody calls their home insurance a waste of money just because their house didn't burn down. Write the rules before you need them. The emergency fund isn't most at risk during genuine emergencies. It's most at risk during ordinary moments of stress, exhaustion, or anxiety, when a non-urgent expense starts to feel necessary and the mental barriers between want and need begin to blur. Justified borrowing from the fund for convenience is how it quietly disappears, and restoring it afterward almost always takes longer than expected. The antidote is to define what counts as an emergency before any pressure exists to reinterpret the rules. Clear, pre-committed criteria reduce the emotional negotiation that happens in difficult moments. Fewer judgment calls in the heat of the moment means fewer compromises. Fewer compromises keeps the protection intact. Rebuild it the moment it's used. There's a particular relief that comes when an emergency fund absorbs a hit and does exactly what it was built to do. That relief is earned, but it carries a risk. Once the immediate pressure lifts, replenishing the fund tends to slip down the priority list. Life normalizes, other expenses compete for attention, and the gap stays open far longer than it should. That gap is real exposure. The next disruption doesn't wait for the fund to recover. Treating replenishment as the immediate next financial priority, not someday but now, closes the window of vulnerability as quickly as possible. Small, regular contributions restart the momentum without requiring a dramatic effort. Consistent protection requires a fund that is rebuilt, not just used. Measure progress, not perfection. There's a flawed belief that an emergency fund only counts once it hits a specific, fully realized target. That belief does real damage. It discourages people who are actively building, making their real progress feel like nothing because it doesn't yet match an ideal. Preparedness isn't a binary state. It exists on a spectrum, and every dollar added moves you meaningfully along it. A fund that covers 2 weeks of expenses is better than no fund. One that covers a month is better still. Any amount saved reduces your dependence on debt when uncertainty arrives, quiets the financial anxiety that distorts everyday decisions, and improves the quality of the choices that follow. Progress toward safety is success. The target is a direction, not a prerequisite. Let it change the way you think, not just the way you save. The most underappreciated thing about an emergency fund is that it starts protecting you long before it ever gets used. Simply knowing the buffer exists shifts something in the background of your financial thinking. Decisions feel less desperate. Spending discipline comes more naturally. Problems get handled with measured responses instead of reactive ones. Fewer reactive decisions means fewer costly mistakes, and fewer costly mistakes compound quietly into better long-term outcomes. The return on an emergency fund isn't just financial, it's cognitive. The peace of mind it provides improves the quality of every other money decision you make. If you're ready to start, don't try to overhaul everything at once. Pick one small automated action from this video and commit to it this week. Drop a comment letting us know which step you're starting with, and subscribe for straightforward, realistic money guidance. Thanks for watching.